Some people find it hard to picture how hard life was in the Middle Ages. From our point of view, some of the things they did every day seem downright cruel. The 9 strange medieval habits below show how strange the Middle Ages were and how far we've come since then. They range from horrible medical treatments and animal tests to gross foods and strange ways of getting a divorce. Trepanation, the process of cutting holes in the head to let the brain breathe, was used to treat everything from headaches to lost items. Physical fights between spouses could be used to settle divorces, and glowing red irons were used to burn off hemorrhoids from the anus, or the doctor's dirty fingers were used to scrape them off. Traditions from the Middle Ages are the most eerie when compared to those of other times in history. It was weird, harder, and more disgusting to live in the Middle Ages in every way. From food and intimacy to science and the law, everything was different. There were real people who did these things a few hundred years ago, even though they seem impossible now. Medieval people burned cats for fun. In ancient Egypt, cats were seen as gods, but in medieval Europe, cats were thought to be evil. In the Middle Ages, Christians thought that God gave them control over the natural world. Men were scared of cats because they seemed to be unable to be controlled, while dogs gladly did what they were told. With the publication of Vox in Rama by Pope Gregory IX on June 13th, 1233 AD, these worries even made their way into church law. This official order said that Satan often changed into a cat, and that people who worshipped the devil kissed the cat's anus at black magic feasts to get Lucifer's favor. Of common wild cats I need not to speak much, for every hunter in England knoweth them, and their falseness and malice are well known, wrote Edward, Duke of York, in the 1400s. But one thing I dare well say, that if any beast has the devil's spirit in him, without doubt it is the cat, both in the wild and the tame. During the bubonic plague in the middle of the 1400s, people were very afraid of cats because they thought cats, not rats, spread the deadly bacteria. During the 15th century, when Pope Innocent VIII was in charge, the church started witch hunts across Europe and banned the whole species. Parisians liked to incinerate cats by the sackful, while the Courimauds, or Coeurs à Miaude, or cat chasers of Saint-Chamond, preferred to chase a flaming cat through the streets. Historian Robert Darnton writes in The Great Cat Massacre, "In parts of Burgundy and Lorraine they danced around a kind of burning maypole with a cat tied to it. Cats were burned in Europe for hundreds of years, and experts say that millions of cats died as a result. Cats were mostly burned, but the Danes put them in buckets and beat them until they died, and the Belgians threw them off of towers. Luckily, rules against cruelty to animals in the 1800s stopped this kind of mass killing." The horrifying practice of trepanation. Trepanation may sound like worried hesitancy, but the surgery in the Middle Ages was much more horrible than that. From the Latin word trepanum, which means borer, the primitive practice of ancient doctors drilling holes in their patients' heads to treat a wide range of illnesses, from seizures to migraines. Doctors thought that letting fresh air touch the dura mater layer of the brain and spinal cord would help people get better. To do this, doctors used a wide range of simple tools, from rocks and wooden tools to metal clamps and holes. As part of getting ready, the sick person's head had to be shaved. People often got trepanations for problems like epilepsy or being possessed by demons. But the medieval practice had very old roots. It had been done by cultures all over the world for thousands of years. The head of Surgical Neurology International, Dr. Miguel A. Faria Jr., says it may have been the first medical treatment ever. Trepanation, or trepanation, of the human skull is the oldest documented surgical procedure performed by man, Faria Jr. wrote in Surgical Neurology International. Treffined skulls have been found from the old world of Europe and Asia to the New World, particularly Peru and South America, from the Neolithic Age to the very dawn of history. In the 1860s, American diplomat E.G. Squire found a skull that had been cut in 3 places in Peru. This is when modern researchers first learned about the history of the surgery. He saw that the skull was growing back, which meant that the person had lived through the ordeal. This was before researchers from all over the world found more cases of the practice. People trepanated more often than was thought in places like ancient Greece and Rome, Africa, South America, and the South Pacific. Many were done to ease pressure or get rid of broken skulls after accidents, but others were completely wrong and didn't get rid of people's demons.
Married couples could divorce by combat. Even though divorce procedures today aren't fun, they were unbearably painful in the Middle Ages. German fencing master Hans Talhofer was the first person to write about the strange practice of divorce by fight. His 1467 document called the Fechtbuch, or fencing book, described the events, which included murders between spouses. As per the instructions, the husband was put up to his waist in a 3-foot-wide hole dug in the ground, with one hand tied behind his back. The woman was to be armed with 3 rocks, each weighing between 1 and 5 pounds, and each one wrapped in cloth, wrote Talhofer. The man could not leave his hole, but the woman was free to run around the edge of the pit. If the man touched the edge of the pit with either his hand or arm, he had to surrender one of his clubs to the judges. If the woman hit him with a rock while he was doing so, she forfeited one of her stones. Professor Kenneth Hodges of the University of Oklahoma found Talhofer's confusing reports. Historians have known about trial by fight for a long time. In this type of trial, the accused can ask for a duel instead of a trial. On the other hand, scholars only seem to have recently learned about divorce by battle. In Talhofer's manuscript, there were pictures of the old experience. It mostly talked about divorces that happened through battle in medieval Germany, which happened less and less after the early 1300s. At the end of the day, these stories show how men were treated differently than women at the time, with men being significantly disadvantaged during the fight. Scholars are still arguing about how divorce decisions were made, but players would probably keep going until one of them gave up. That is, if they weren't already stabbed or choked to death.
Animal trials and executions were very popular. In the United States, one of the most important legal principles is the right to a fair hearing by a jury of one's peers. It gives people who are being charged faith in the legal system and hope that their fate won't be decided by a biased judge. Even though animals don't know this, it was still done to them in medieval Europe. Author Edward P. Evans wrote a book in 1906 called The Criminal Punishment and Capital Prosecution of Animals, which says that even rats that were being bad were sent a friendly letter of advice in order to induce them to quit any house in which their presence is deemed undesirable. Pigs were most widely also affected by this dynamic. The most well-known case of this kind was the death of a 5-year-old boy in Savigny, France, in 1457. People in the village saw one sow and 6 of its piglets kill the child. This led to a full trial with 2 prosecutors, 8 witnesses, a judge, and a defense lawyer for the adult pig. With the help of witness statements and blood on the pig, it was easy for the court to decide that the animal had killed the child. The piglets, on the other hand, were found not guilty because they were so young. The sow was finally hanged by her back feet from a tree that had been used as a homemade gallows. Animal trials in the Middle Ages may seem extreme now, but they took up a lot of time and energy at the courts. Animals like goats, horses, and dogs could be put through these processes and then killed or hung for allegedly misbehaving. All that was needed were criminal charges. This was done for the same reason that cats were burned in the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, Christians in Europe thought that God had given them control over earth, and that it was their job to make sure that everyone followed a strict set of rules about how to behave on earth. Luckily, it has been banned to do that for a long time. Hemorrhoids were burned off with hot irons. The ancients didn't understand diseases like cancer or autoimmune disorders, but many diseases that we know about today were well known thousands of years ago. Doctors in the Middle Ages might have thought that people with epilepsy were controlled by the devil, but problems like hemorrhoids were just as noticeable back then as they are now. People with hemorrhoids in the Middle Ages did not have access to improved methods or anesthetics, which was bad news. In the Middle Ages, doctors burned off hemorrhoids with glowing red pieces of hot iron, or just scraped the swollen veins off of patients' anuses with their fingers. In the Middle Ages, people who had hemorrhoids were often called victims of Saint Fiacre's curse. The name didn't make sense because the Catholic priest was the patron saint of people with hemorrhoids. He is said to have had hemorrhoids himself, but sat on a stone and got better right away. Doctors today have told people with hemorrhoids for a long time not to sit directly on the swollen group of veins and to give them time to rest. It's likely that Saint Fiacre sat on a stone and let his hemorrhoids move back into his anus. For people in the Middle Ages who didn't respond to that, other ways were tried. In the beginning, most doctors told their patients to pray while sitting on a stone. Some people say that the rock that Saint Fiacre sat on is still there in his yard. But when this didn't help, doctors burned off the lines by inserting cautery irons into the patient's anus. The doctor's fingernails were used to scrape the worst cases, which was very painful. The famous Hippocratic Corpus Medical Works collection from Alexandrian Greece offered this method, even though it seems very old and simple. It worked in the end, but it hurt a lot. The strange world of medieval food and delicacies. During the Middle Ages, people in Europe often cooked, served, and ate foods that most people today would never even try to eat. The foods that people in the Middle Ages ate, like roasted cats and lampreys that moved, would probably get people charged with animal cruelty today. The Middle Ages saw a lot of people eating bread, veggies, and meat, which was a pretty healthy mix. People even brought their own meat to local cooks, who wrapped it in dough and baked it. Pretzels were a popular and easy-to-carry snack. It's too bad that not everyone could live such a relaxed life. In the Middle Ages, European bars and inns served a lot of strange foods, like baby rabbits and barnacle geese. Since then, historians have said that this is because of Christianity. Christians followed at least 3 fast days a week and set strict rules about their diets, which led to some strange solutions. During Lent, people fasted for 40 days and didn't eat any animal products for the whole week. People fasted on Wednesdays to remember the day Judas betrayed Christ, on Fridays to remember God's pain, and on Saturdays to honor the Virgin Mary. This was based on the Bible. Henish and fast and feast, food in medieval society, say that this kind of self-discipline was a spring cleaning to freshen the soul and make it ready to receive God's grace. There were no rules about fish, but there were rules about land animals that would die in the biblical flood. People in coastal towns could eat fish as a religious practice, but people who lived inland had to eat old, rotting herring and cod. Many people drank more wine or ale to help them stomach meals made of lamprey, which were cats that superstitious people killed and cooked to show their devotion to Satan. Some strange cases were rabbit fetuses, beaver tails, and barnacle geese, which were thought to be aquatic animals at the time. Good news for everyone. During the Reformation in the 1600s, these common rules were dropped and people could eat whatever they wanted, even on Fridays. The groom of the stool was a disgusting job. Many people have good reason to complain about their bad jobs, but no job was worse than being a medieval groom of the stool. The person who was chosen for this job had to move the king's portable toilet and keep a thorough record of his bowel movements. Surprisingly, a lot of people wanted the strange job. Grooms of the stool had the king's ear more than most because they were close to their ruler from dawn until dusk. Because of this, grooms became very useful because they could talk to the king privately and learn more about their wants, weaknesses, and secrets over time. Back in the 1500s, when the Tudors were in power, this job came about out of necessity. Kings needed help taking off their clothes before going to the bathroom because they wore such fancy clothes. In the Middle Ages, a toilet was just a block of wood with a hole carved into it and a seat wrapped in fabric. Scholars are still not sure if the groom just gave the king a cloth or actually cleaned his anus, but the good things about the job were well known. As soon as men served royalty, they were considered important citizens. They were chosen by the king and usually came from good homes. It grew in importance during the time of the Tudors, especially after Henry VII moved much of the administration of his government, including his finances, to the Privy Chamber where the groom resided, said history professor Ben Lowe, according to How Stuff Works. This led to a more administrative role for many grooms. With power over the king and important knowledge of how royal power works, grooms could ask for favors, make suggestions, and receive gifts from people who were jealous. William Compton was Henry VIII's groom. He got land grants, leases, and posts, and he was paid the same as a top nobleman. Inside, medieval bedding ceremonies. Many religious partners today agree not to have sex until they get married. In the Middle Ages, bedding ceremonies were a way for wedding guests to see the act happen. In medieval Europe, beddings were used by all cultures to show that the community was committed to the couple's marriage. Beddings were mostly done with friends and family, but people from the area and neighbors also took part. Before the ceremony, the priest blessed the bed, while the bride and groom drank wine, and their bridesmaids and groomsmen threw their stockings at them. A straight hit meant the person throwing the stockings would soon get married. The bed curtains were drawn, and the couple consummated their marriage when this old rite was over. This was mostly done in secret, but some scholars say that people were watching the intercourse as well. After their weddings, even royals like Catherine of Aragon were given beds. Catherine was led from the wedding feast by ladies in waiting, then courtiers derobed Henry, say faith, in the bedchamber, explained historian Lucy Worsley. Until the very last minute, the room would have been full of people cheering them on. As the 17th century went on, bedding became less common. The English King Charles I, who ruled from 1625 to 1649, strongly refused to take part in the act. Still, beddings were made for at least 100 years. Uncle Charles II not only slept with King William III and Queen Mary II, but he also cheered them on during sex. The horrible execution method of being pressed to death. People who were suspected of crimes were often put to death by being pressed under heavy weights for thousands of years. But the most common time for this cruel penalty was in medieval Europe. The act itself was pretty simple. The subject was tied down and crushed to death by a heavy object. In contrast to Southeast Asia, which did this more than 4,000 years ago, Europeans did not use elephants to crush their enemies. The British used large pieces of stone, and this was often just a way to torture people. Finally, the act was only done to people who refused to make a guilty or not guilty plea. Officials put victims in chains and then put more and more weight on their chests in the hopes that they would cry out and beg for help. The person died because someone refused to help them. A lot of the time, their bones broke inside their bodies, and sometimes they tore through the skin. During the Salem witch trials, the most well-known case in American history turned up. Several women in Danvers, Massachusetts, said that Farmer Giles Corey cursed them and visited them in spirit form. He was tried in 1692 and refused to make a plea. He was then pressed to death. Giles was asked to strip naked and lay down, face up on the ground, wrote the Massachusetts Historical Society. A wooden board was then placed on top of him, and on top of the board, one by one, Sheriff George Corwin placed large rocks. On the third day, 19th September 1692, Corey died from being pressed to death. In the end, England made the practice illegal in 1772. During the Age of Enlightenment, people thought again about the ways people were punished in the Middle Ages and decided on more humane ways to do so.